Hello everybody and welcome to today's IEP Live Learn Lunch. We're really excited to be joined for, I think it's our 104th Live Learn Lunch by the Good Employability Company. David Imber, one of our fellows, is going to be working with us today or taking us through his really thought-provoking webinar on people versus the machine, or digging into essentialism. I'm going to hand straight over to him and I'm going to look forward to hearing what he's got to say about people versus the machine. So over to you, David.
Thank you very much, Helen, and thank you for looking after us in this e-seminar system that you've got so brilliantly set up. It's great. I don't even have to leave my little hideaway in Devon to be able to talk to you all, and thank you all for giving up. I hope not everything about your lunch. If you've got a sandwich, please eat it. Don't hesitate. In this seminar, I'm going to gallop through some interesting, I think they're interesting anyway, some interesting theories and the consequences of those theories fairly quickly. So please do use the chat box to ask questions, to make comments, to disagree, to fight, to argue. I'm sure there must be a rotten tomato that you can throw in the chat box one way or another, so go for it. But this isn't going to be quite as interactive as some of my sessions, largely because I've got a lot of ground to cover and several important concepts. So this is about using machines to give employment and careers advice, and a quick look at the sales pitch, the hype, and the actual reality that we encounter. So let's get straight into it with the next slide, Helen. Oh, go back one. I want you in the chat box to say yes or no to whether you've used the machine that's in the picture on the bottom of your screen. And I can tell you, I used one of these when it was brand new. So I am a good friend to technology. I've been kicking around microcomputers since the 1980s. And I think they're fabulous things. And of course, we're all using them today, which we couldn't back then. That Commodore PET machine now sits in the British Museum and it didn't connect to anything.
Do you know, David, I've popped in the chat there, no, because I haven't. Mark said Commodore PET was before my time.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I don't recognise that, but I had a Commodore 64, which was a home one.
That counts as a yes.
Else.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was before or after this.
Yeah, I can't remember myself. Time has faded my memory to a pale sepia colour. Let's go on. So let's bearing in mind that this machinery, next slide please, Helen, the machinery has advanced, it can do wonderful things, it connects, so why don't we, since we all love it, use it so much, use a machine to gather all the data, cut out the guesswork, and have some accurate, consistent advice that is universal and easy to use for anybody who wants to. You know, it's obviously the way to go, isn't it? And actually, throughout my rather long career since the 1980s in employability, people have been trying this in one way or another. So this approach has got quite a long history to it. Next slide, please. Now, underlying the concept of using a machine to tell somebody what career they might like is a vital philosophical concept called essentialism. And that is the belief, and it's only a belief, that all things have an essence inside them, and it's the essence that makes them what they are. If you believe that a cat is only a cat because it has essence of cat, you're an essentialist. And if you believe that a cat that contains essence of dog is really a dog, you're still an essentialist. But there are other viewpoints, and a key one is nominalism, where you say, well, actually, there aren't any essences. All there are cats and dogs and people and so forth, and all the rest of it is just so much chit chat. But the essence idea is very important when we use computers to give careers guidance. Next slide, please. And here's a kind of ultra brief description of the difficulty. I think we'd probably agree that there really is nothing of any value in saying that men have an essence or women have a different essence. Sure, there are biological differences, but that's about as far as you can go before people start throwing things at you, and quite right too. Is it right to say that bus drivers have an essence which makes them specially bus drivery? Or that accountants have something about them, whether it's they like biting pencils and looking at rolls of paper or something else, that makes them an accountant? Is there an essence? And if so, how on earth would we find it? If you don't have an essence because you're a woman or because you're a man, why should you have an essence if you're an accountant? Well, there is a quick answer to that question, and the next slide will help us look at it. Suppose instead of saying there's a single essence, we said there are lots of different things about people and we can measure them. And when we get the combinations right, then we've got a package that looks like an essence, even though it's got lots of different dimensions to it. Aha, now we're talking, aren't we? Now we can say, of course, there are lots of different kinds of workers and bus drivers and accountants and men and women, but we can measure the different dimensions of their personalities or their traits, and we'll get close to something useful. And would you believe it? People have been doing that for ages, and some of them are listed, Helen, on the next slide. Here are some of the essentialist dimensions. At the top, our most famous one is John Holland's career types. 6 of them that together are recommended to make 720 different personality types, which strikes me as being completely trivial compared to the 26,000 occupations listed in the standard occupational classification. But it started ages ago with people like Freud, who had the superego, the ego, and the id, which just about made out that everybody was crazy. Myers-Briggs has been attacked and substantially demolished scientifically, but it actually continues to make quite a lot of money for quite a lot of people. The psychologists love the big 5 personality traits, and there's a whole cottage industry researching those. Eric Berne came out in the 1970s saying that we communicated as parents, adults, or children, or combinations. That's a bit Freudian, wasn't it? And then there's an A, B, C, D, and Jung, who's, along with Freud, crazy ancient stuff that had very little evidence at all. Cattell came up with 16 personality factors. There they are all listed. And it goes on and on. You could make a career out of these, couldn't you? You could just make them up, and then do some research and bingo. Oh yeah, that's what people have been doing for ages. So before you dive into any career system, just ask yourself whether you're at risk of falling for one or other, and why, and what the evidence is. Is it supported? So these are multidimensional ways of thinking about personality. So let's look at what multidimensional might mean. I want to say Mark has said the big 5 is a proven construct that it does relate to brain structure. I wouldn't discount it. Well, I wouldn't discount your remark, Mark. I'm sure it does. Whether it relates to careers is another matter. So let's get theoretical. How does multidimensional work? Let's start with a one-dimensional scale from left to right. This is a good scale because the opposites are real. But if we try a scale which, for example, has emotional at one end and rational at the other, These are not opposites, so you can't measure them on a single scale. They overlap too much. And even if you did think they were opposites, you don't know whether the scores you ascribe to your measures are evenly distributed. So drawing even a single dimensional scale is a complex thing that requires a great deal of effort and research and thought. Next slide, please. Then if we take even two scales and put them against each other, they ought to have a quality of what measurement on one not affecting measurement on the other. So on the left, you can see if we measure up and down, that's a valid scale. If we measure left and right, that's a valid scale. And if we measure them both, it remains a valid two-dimensional field because up and down doesn't affect left and right. But if we try and measure a person, and so suppose, for example, we measure logical to intuitive, bit of a dodgy scale, but I just invented it because it's the kind of thing people do invent. And we measure emotional against rational, again, the sort of thing that people think might be helpful. Those two scales are not valid because intuitive is part of emotional, emotional is part of rational, and rational is part of logical. So this multidimensional thing is pretty difficult, but let's assume it can be done. And let's look next at how, as a concept, essentialism is applied to people going to work or choosing careers. The next slide, Helen, describes this concept. At the heart is the notion that people have essences, in the red dot, that the essences are steady and we can classify them in a number of dimensions. And the famous Holland system requires only 6 dimensions. Now, this is a really popular idea, but it is much disputed, and it may well turn out to be misleading, not only for the reasons I've just given, but because the dimensions themselves may or may not be real things. Remember, nobody has ever proven an essence. Okay, but let's say we do have personalities, we do have traits, we are the way we are, we're distinguishably the individuals that we've always been. Let's give them some headroom here and think about it. Right, now we're going to use a simple questionnaire in the buff-coloured circle to identify those essences using multidimensional scales. And we are going to study those scales and make sure we make them as good as they can be, in spite of my criticisms earlier. So we do that, and we discover that the retest reliability is not very good. It's uncertain what's being measured, because the scales may not be valid. But more than anything, different tests assiduously created and publicized by different organizations, different tests give different results. And if that's the case, it might be that one of those tests is the right one, but how on earth do you know? But again, let's cut them some slack here. They're trying to do a useful job. This is worth doing, isn't it? Because otherwise it's all just guesswork. So we'll go out and we will measure jobs, and the people who occupy jobs, we will use the same kinds of questionnaires, the same dimensions, the same essentialist concepts. And we go out and we measure them, and what do? Of course, we discover that we have to measure current job occupants. We can't measure anyone who's not in the job. And that carries the huge risk that we fix our biases about what jobs are suitable for which people. Remember, earlier on I mentioned essence of woman. when I went to the typing pool, when things like that existed, when the Commodore PET had not invaded our workplaces, and we still used groups of young women in local government offices to sit and type letters and reports, why shouldn't I have measured the fact that they're all women, and therefore typists should be women? That's bias fixing. In the green circle, we reach the point at which we think we've got this cracked. We've cut ourselves some slack on the other issues. We've been careful about bias. We now say that if we can match personal essences and job essences, we can come out with some really reliable lists of occupations, and occupations which enhance satisfaction and performance. That's where we want to be. Furthermore, we can use some fabulous modern machines to help us do it. Great. Okay, we had to cut some slack, but then it's all guesswork anyway. It's all opinion. This is better than nothing. Recommendations we can make. Oh dear, they turn out to be inconsistent between repeat tests and different versions of the same test. Well, did I begin by warning you that I was going to get a bit cross about all this? Because we're constructing here a system which seems to have serious flaws, from the philosophical center to the practical green ring at the outside. And yet they are marketed to us all over the place. I'm going to pause and give you a chance to think about that, and in your chat box, just say, yeah, rubbish, or yes, it's true, or I'd like you particularly, please, if you use a matching system like this, a career guidance system online, would you just say, yes, I use it, or something like that in the chat box, or no, I don't? I'm curious to see how many of us there are.
Okay, so Marcus said it's not a perfect science and should never be marketed as perfect. And Marcus designed them in the past. That's interesting. Very interesting.
I must say, I've been using them for 20 years on and off. And so, yeah, I really started out thinking they were going to be the answer. Who's used these in the past? I'm going to type. I have. Oops, not like that. Bad fingers. Yeah.
People are being very quiet, David. I think they're worried about what you will say to them if they admit that they've used them.
Go on. Now, they shouldn't be marketed, as Mark says, shouldn't be marketed as perfect. So let's have a quick look at how they are marketed. Let's look at the next slide. Now, suppose you leave out all the detail about the rationale for these things. If all you say is that matching personal and job essences provides good lists of occupations, and you furthermore say, you'll only need our version because it's the best one, that's a sales pitch. That's leaving out all the important stuff about the rationale that you're pushing your customer towards. Darren says, we've developed a series of questions to identify where we can help a customer more and focus on what they want. That then works in tandem with offering a ton of resources where, and here's the good bit, the customer can pick and choose what they believe will help them. We're going to come back to that, Darren, and I'm grateful for your insight. Let's look at the next slide. So here are some real sales pitches from various sources. Like this chatbot, it's called Bob, And it got a grant of, I think, 30 or 50 grand or something from the Department for Education. I haven't worked out whether it got the grant because it desperately needed it or because it was actually a really good one. Bob's pretty cool. It's an intelligent friend. Yeah, get in, that's what I need. I haven't got any of those. And there's that job search coaching drip. I wonder if anyone who's listening, thank you for listening, or it's kind of you, really, it is. Does anyone know what a job search coaching drip is? But to say that it helps people stay motivated and take action, that's a pretty strong claim. Would you buy a second-hand car from this person? Oh, sure, you might be tempted. And as someone else says, the overall outcome is up-to-date, current, relevant information that helps you spend more quality time in helping their customers. So all it's doing is removing the rubbish. You can spend more quality time. As though what you were doing that it's taken away wasn't quality or was wasted. Ah, okay, right. I'm not sure about that either. Let's look at the next slide, please. And here's a really, really outrageous promise. This is about chatbots, and one in particular. It empowers employability professionals to support clients who might be facing more significant barriers. Whoa, that is a promise and a half. So my most difficult clients, furthest from the labour market, facing the most demanding barriers with the lowest motivation and low levels of confidence, a chatbot is going to help them. God, I should have had this bottle, shouldn't I have done? Next slide, please. There's always a bit of small print, isn't there? Don't buy a car from a salesman without reading the contract. And importantly, one of the ones I've just quoted also says chatbot can never do careers guidance on its own. Often it's confidence we need most, and working in tandem is a powerful recipe. Well, that to me, you know, I'm an old-fashioned old curmudgeon here. I really am. That reads like doublespeak. It can't do it on its own. We need confidence, and working in tandem is better. Oh, yeah, okay. Maybe, maybe not. Never seen any evidence on it. And finally, a well-designed chatbot improves the efficiency and frees up time. Oh, okay. So suddenly, instead of spending 10 minutes getting to know a client, you zip straight to the answer and bingo, yeah, you can have a job as a bus driver. That's essentialism. That's where we started. It's the promise of efficiency. So let's go from there and look at a real experience. Next slide, please. Now, we'd be here all afternoon if I described this in full, but on the left of your screen in bold black type is what the chatbot actually said and does in a live interaction. My response is in the unbold ordinary typeface in the middle column. And you can see that out of that whole page, I said, hello, self-employed, 72, male, degree, Exeter, discover, and answered a 3-minute quiz. That's all I did. And I got a list of occupations. It recommends me to be, is it a nurse or a biochemist? Or a further education teaching professional? Oh, I can't wait to be a further education teaching professional. I could teach, like, what could I? Yeah, I could teach advanced MIG welding. How about that? No, I couldn't. What on earth does he mean? No guidance, no response from me. So when I started again to try and find out more, it just repeated the whole thing. That's what it really looks like. The next slide has a different chatbot. Let's look at it. The same basic principle. Ask me a few questions which are supposed to line me up. So, you know, when was I born? What's my relationship? Have I got a degree? My gender? Do I have a disability? Yeah, I said yes. It didn't even ask me about it. Didn't even ask. Didn't even show the slightest inquisitiveness. And asked for my goal. And my goal out of the options given was to find another job. And after a couple more steps, it said, here is a list of strategies to help you succeed. 1, find a job you love. Dear Lord, help me. I want, please, to ask you to do me a favor, all of you. Choose a number between 1 and 10 to describe how good you think this interaction is in helping someone find another job. 1 being dreadful and 10 being absolutely the best way of doing it. You've got the message. 0 from Darren, 1 from Nigel. Okay. Come on, let's see you 0. -1. Well done, Martinez. You know, it's such a relief to me that you agree. This is a chatbot which was given money by the government to develop itself into a commonplace public access system. I can't believe it. What the hell is going on here? Stop me, stop me. Stop me, keep typing your answers in. And we'll look at the next slide, which shows us where do they get their information from. Now, these 3 sources on here are not the only sources, but they are the main ones that most people use. The first one is an American system which describes 1,000 occupations in the United States. And it's pretty damn good, I can tell you. You can go online, it's free. You can find out an awful lot about jobs that you would like to know about the occupation, how skillful you have to be, education, opportunities. It's great, really is. It's hard to navigate, but it's all right. Second one is the UK's National Office for National Statistics system called NOMIS. You can use it online direct. It's a bit flipping clunky until you get to know it. But when you do, my goodness, you can get some really detailed information out of that. How many people are there in Bury St Edmunds who've been unemployed for more than 2 years and are male and have got a higher degree? That kind of stuff. And then the third one is web scraping, which I think means nothing more than automatic searching for jobs and information on the web, and that's what it is. What you get out of it is as good as what goes in, and if you're a web user, you know that what goes in is often a bit iffy. Quite important to note, and we'll come back to it, ONET and NOMIS are not raw data. They've already been processed into categories and systems that you can access, and that's going to turn out to be important. Web scraping is data because it's just stuff you've found, but it's dirty, it's repetitive, it's got big gaps in it. It's not straightforward stuff. We'll come back to that. A quick look in the next slide, please, Helen, at the Holland typologies and ONET. ONET uses Holland typologies to give careers advice, and these are 2 quotations from respected researchers. The first one says that the Holland typologies are not enough to describe occupations, and they are confounded by other factors, such as, they quote, prestige and sex type. The second quote, if you can really decode that, you're better than I am, I must say, really effectively says, it's completely jumbled up. Please don't use this in any simplistic way. Consider all codes that may be derived from the 3 highest ranking rather than limit consideration to occupation, blah, 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 blah. In other words, it don't work in any straightforward way, and it requires a human to interpret it. Another real life example in the next slide, Helen. So this is me, 4 different systems. All claiming to be damn good things, you know, really valuable, will help you. And this is what they said I should be in my next job. I don't think one of them, not one of them, asked about my disability. So Bob, which didn't ask, is not there. Then you can see there's such a range of things. They seem to have picked out something around about helping or human support, for which much credit, but actually, do you know what? None of them would have clocked that being a semi-retired old geezer, I would probably rather be a temporary painter or even a delivery driver because of my time of life. They've missed it, and it's such an obvious point. So just quickly to recap, the theory is dodgy, the dimensions are iffy, the rationale is hidden, the promises are great, and when you get through the system, the job matches you're offered are, well, you know, there's something in there, but it's not a great deal. Next slide. Quick look at some of those claims. Career Chat uses artificial intelligence. Well, Marc Mézard of the École Normale Supérieure in France, writing in Neurophysics News, says that they are very far from being intelligent. And the proceedings of a symposium of engineers on computational intelligence, so these are friends of artificial intelligence, tell us that clinical judgments must be generated by unformulizable human skills. In other words, artificial intelligence does not yet and may never replace these kinds of human skills. So when people say, oh, we're using artificial intelligence, keep one word in mind: artificial. It ain't intelligence. It uses something called machine learning. In the next slide, Helen. And machine learning is a really lovely pair of words. They sound great, don't they? The machine is established to search for statistical correlations in data. And here we come back to ONET and to NOMIS and so forth. It requires large amounts of clean, raw data before the machine can find the statistical correlations. And by large, I mean large. The machine that learned to play the game Go and beat an expert had the equivalent of 16 years, 7 hours a day, 5 days a week, non-stop practice at playing Go. Had that much data. But what we're looking at is systems that use ONET and NOMIS and other things, which are clean data, because somebody's cleaned them. They're not the data. They've already been processed. And web scraping produces raw but unclean data. And the result is an artificial idiot savant that can excel at well-bounded tasks, can get things very wrong. And I love the quote in blue at the bottom of your screen. It's a beautiful book, actually, this one, Artificial Unintelligence. I recommend it's a very good read because Meredith Broussard has been a journalist as well as a computer buff. She writes very well. I think that describes machine learning rather well. Next, please. Because the other thing that people say is they use natural language processing to talk to us on their computer. And here's a quote about natural language processing. It is a direct quote which I got the week before last online from the Friendly Careers chatbot. and it can't even understand the simplest English sentence. I mean, can you imagine saying that to a person? So something's being processed. Is it natural? It most certainly isn't. Does anyone want to say anything in the chat box? I'm on a roll here, but you can tell probably I can get angry about this stuff for weeks on end. Please ask any questions. If we've got any time at the end, we might be able to go back to some of these points, but I'd be glad to hear from you now. So let's look, next slide, please, Helen. Let's look at some of the risks involved. We don't really understand all the factors that guide career decision making. Chatbots can engineer social harm, and much credit to one of the esteemed people who's leading one of these chatbot developments who has pointed that out to me. It's not this quotation that you see there, it's another person, Deirdre Hughes, who has reminded me that social harm can come from chatbots. Artificial intelligence has never succeeded in simulating the behavior of an ape. Well, actually, it would be a huge step forward if they could. Equally important, it can't handle emotions. And there's this philosopher down at the bottom of your screen who asks, if we want an algorithm to be fair choosing candidates, we have to ask what fair means. And the conclusion he reaches is that delegating decision-making is not only impossible, it's unconscionable. So from lack of understanding via failure to simulate behavior to philosophical objections, we're facing some serious risks. Next slide, please. Well, actually, what about the idea that, you know, as long as we're careful about it, it can't do any harm? What about, how about that? That's a thought, isn't it? You know, we can use this when we want to and not when we don't. It's got to be better than guesswork. Have you ever taken your computer down to Sidwell Street in Exeter to check whether Terry's Cafe is still working? Your computer doesn't know the answer to that question, but your client might need the answer. So it might be useful, but it might not be better than guessing. And it's got lots of good data. Of course it has. ONET is brilliant. NOMIS is fantastic. So, and LMI for all provides, it's a bit clunky, but it provides an interface to help you explore things like that. So we could use a usable interface, couldn't we? Yeah, definitely we could do with that. Then we've got to ask who's making decisions. Is it the machine making the decision? Well, I'll tell you, I had a list of decisions made by the machine a few slides ago. Is it the advisor making the decision? Or is it the client? Somebody's typed in, I'm sorry, I have to look at that. Mark Abrams, what about GDPR? Oh, yes, indeed. What indeed? Well, yes. But I think this is that one of the real risks here is even used as an aid, because the machine looks to be objective and uses data in large quantities. It has a spurious authority. The machine comes out on top, and spurious authority is spreading bad news via chatbots. And it doesn't work. You know, there are examples from previous artificial intelligence installations include making people in poorer areas pay more for goods. That's differential pricing models, gender discrimination and race discrimination. Because if you train your intelligent machine on existing circumstances, it learns what's out there. It doesn't have a moral compass. So, yeah, okay, maybe it's an aid, But can it do any harm? Yes, it certainly can. So what's missing from this? I see from the chat box here, people are spotting this and are well familiar. The next slide, I think, for me, captures what actually is missing. It can't handle metaphor. We use metaphor all the time. And I've got, as Helen knows, I've got a whole presentation about that, and we'll look at it in my next go, if you can bear to hear me again. But artificial intelligence can't handle metaphor. It gets stuck. You know, it gets the liquid glue all over the keyboard. It can't empathize and has no emotional understanding. And even if it appears to have an emotional understanding, we have no confidence that it is actually understanding an emotion or just reacting to a grammatical formation of words. Philosophers may join me after lunch for several bottles of something stimulating to discuss that idea further. Somebody has said, I can't see the top of it on my screen, but it says, no chatbot, every chatbot I ever used has only achieved is leaving me feel more misunderstood, unheard, and really frustrated. Ah, God. Yeah, it's Mariam. Hello, Mariam. I'm reassured that we're agreeing on this. Artificial intelligence, as we've seen in the examples, has no relevant social interaction, and it reduces decisions to data and logic. And I'm sure some of you know, but if you don't, I'm going to say it anyway. People who have brain damage, which prevents them feeling emotions, become unable to make rational decisions. Data and logic alone are not the same as decisions. Emotions are essential. Let's look at the next slide. And I tried to capture in a few words some of the things that are missing from artificial intelligence and careers applications. About real jobs being unique, real jobs adjusting to who holds them, changing over time, and having their own social and cultural frameworks. That's what it's really like. And real clients, you know, if you're a real client, and suppose you lived in 1980 in a little village called Grange Villas, a few miles outside Durham City, there was a probability at about 80%, if you were male, that you were also a coal miner. Real clients depend on where they've been and where they live. They're flexible. Their choices are constrained. There was an Indian restaurant in Grange Villa. It's shut now. It changes over time. It responded to the environment of a coal mine and a little community that worked down the mine, but it couldn't last. And real clients, thank heavens, are emotional, inconsistent, and uncertain. They're just like us, aren't they? Aren't they? Isn't this what we're here for? I think it is. I really think it is. And this leads me to think actually that there is a better way of doing this careers guidance thing. Let's look at the next slide. People can handle metaphor and they can empathize and they can show emotional understanding. Yes, they will need practice. They will need training. They will need to put aside their prejudices and they will need to learn new stuff. Yes, of course they do. But they are able, because they are human, to do the right kind of social interaction, and they do not have to reduce decisions to data and logic. Of course, they're limited. Of course, they cannot hold. None of us can hold all the data in our heads. Would it help us if we could? I have my doubts. Of course, character analysis might be useful for some clients, and a decent psychological assessment might be just the thing once in a while, but not for everybody. So my message really is that we don't need these chatbots. We need skillful people. We need easier access to the data with a simple to use interface so that we, the humans, and our clients, the humans, can explore it in an intuitive way. And then we can make decisions that react with our own emotional understanding of our flexible human context. Please, no more essentialism. I've just about had enough of it. Questions, please. Questions, grumbles, brickbats, rotten tomatoes. Let's hear. We've got 5 minutes, Helen, perhaps at the moment.
Yes, we do. So I think you've actually, as we've gone along, read a few of the comments. But let's have a look and see what we've got. And I'm sorry if I repeat any of the comments that have been made. So Nigel said earlier when we were looking at some of the slides, nearly all of the chat box or the systems only go down the positive path and do not allow for individualization. And Mariam, you alluded to her comment earlier, but you didn't read the whole thing. So let's have a look at that because it was a good one. So people are social creatures and the most effective type of support requires social interaction. No machine can offer the user that feeling of being heard, understood, and establishing rapport. I can't read emotions, nuances, figure out what's being left unsaid. No chatbot can, no chatbox. Oh no, I can, not I can't, sorry. I can read emotions, nuances, and figure out what's being unsaid. That makes more sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And no chatbot can achieve this. And I think we had the rest of that comment earlier. Every chatbot I've ever used has only left me feeling more misunderstood and heard and really frustrated. And Darren said, we developed a chatbot purely to help staff find a document policy or other supporting documents rather than them trawling through 600 plus documents. It works, but it actually isn't used. People prefer to ask the department manager instead.
Yeah, get away. It's true, isn't it?
It's true, isn't it? Yes, often it's easier to just ask someone, and I think sometimes it keys into we just want to interact with other people, don't we? So given a choice between asking someone and doing a search on a computer, that's what many people will do.
Yeah. So thank you all. If there are really no more, we've got a few moments.
Yes, yeah, and I would encourage people, if you want to challenge any of it or if you've got any questions around any of it. One of the wonderful things that David does for us is he does all of that research that you will have seen earlier and really looks into different approaches and different methods and different software. So we know that there's basis to his position on things. So if you do want to ask any of those questions, now is your chance to ask. I know earlier on when we were looking at some of those approaches around the big 5, people will have had some thought around those. So please do let me know. I think they've gone shy, David.
They've gone shy, haven't they? I know it's when I talk too much. It's just the same as with clients. If you talk too much, they stop paying attention.
Yeah, and the knack is to get them to talk to you, isn't it?
Yeah, that's absolutely, and I haven't got it this time. Let's look at the last slide while I thank people again for giving up their lunch. No more. I was ever so glad I found that little bottle of scaredy cat essence. Next time, in a few weeks, isn't it, Helen? I'm not sure if we've got a date yet.
I don't think we have, but we will make it soon.
We'll choose a day. Next time, we're going to be leaving the chatbots behind and asking ourselves how we use metaphor to describe the qualities of what we do. And we've done this a little bit in a previous seminar. Metaphors like what's a good metaphor? The productive environment in which it's all down to outputs and processes. Metaphors like customer is king when you try and get feedback from your clients to help you improve your service. That kind of stuff. Practical ways of thinking about quality in employability services. And what I hope we'll be able to do is to see how the different ways we think about what we do lead us to different kinds of services, different ways of measuring services. So, as with many of these things, no easy answers, no simple formulas, no need to feel unduly challenged, except by the idea that it's terribly challenging. I do hope.
Excellent. No, it's going to be another good one. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much. So Darren has said a really nice comment, and I think it encapsulates how many of us feel. He said it's been worthwhile attending. It makes me feel more confident when I challenge such development internally of things like automation or bots.
That's great. Thank you.
And Mariam has said, thanks for a great session. So much to think about. My brain hurts from all that stretching. Yeah. And Nigel said, the essence is that the human still is a vital component in any interaction. Thank you. Yeah. Jeanette says, thank you, David. I love your erudite delivery.
Oh, erudite.
I know. And
my head is 10 times bigger already.
Oh, wonderful. And Martin has said, thank you, David. I found your presentation really insightful. And thank you all for attending. Honestly, I know I say this every time, but David's presentations always are. They do always stretch our minds, make us think and explore and challenge our viewpoints on different things around service delivery and anything employability. So it's always wonderful to have him here. Thank you all for joining us today for this Live Learn Lunch. Next week, we are joined by another fellow. It's fellow season at the moment. I love it when I get all the IEP fellows on. Next week, we're joined by Liz Sewell, who will be talking to us about inclusion, the importance of inclusion in the workplace. So it's going to be a great session. It's going to be really engaging.
I'm going to cut right in there, Helen, and say you must go and listen to Liz. She's an absolute genius and has got so many insights that leave me gasping for breath, because she's immensely practical, humane, thoughtful, and a great service she runs.
She really does, and she's going to be talking to us about inclusion and flexible working, and it's so important. And I think I've said this before when I've mentioned it, David, on the Live Learn Lunches, is, you know, flexible working is so important to so many of our programme participants. It's important to me. I'm in the job I'm in because it allows for flexible working. And it fits in around all of my other responsibilities. So it's going to be a really good, engaging one. Liz will be talking to us about how she promotes flexible working with employers to increase their acceptance of it and to increase inclusion. So please do come along for it, everybody. Thank you, David. Thank you, everyone, for spending your lunch with me. I always enjoy my Wednesday lunch times, and it's great to see you all. And I look forward to seeing you all next week on next week's session. I'm going to stop. Big
thanks to you, Helen, and to everybody.
Oh, thank you, David. Thanks.